We hope you and your family are enjoying back to school season. Visit queenslibrary.org to see all of our back to school programs and giveaways, and to read our back to school guide, full of helpful information and resources for you and your family as you prepare for the upcoming school year. Every year, Hispanic Heritage Month celebrates the achievements of Hispanic Americans and their contributions to our nation and our culture. Explore our virtual and in-person programs, discover our special Hispanic Heritage book lists for all ages, grab a copy of our Hispanic Heritage brochure from your local library, and don't miss our Tapiz Cultural Art Exhibit at Central Library. Visit queenslib.org/blog to learn more. Banned Books Week is September 22nd through September 28th, and it is more important than ever to stand against censorship and celebrate the freedom to read. Check out our book lists, our upcoming programs, and our Banned Books Library Card Design Contest. The winning selection will be featured on QPL's first Banned Books Special Edition Library Card. For more information, visit queenslibrary.org. It's Library Card Sign-Up Month. A Queens Public Library card is your key to everything the library has to offer. More than 5 million books, movies, and other media, over 40,000 classes and events per year, more than 5,000 computer workstations all across Queens, and so much more. Visit our website or one of our branches today to apply for your QPL card.
Good evening. This is Tim Barnes, and welcome to Culture Connection. Culture Connection, created by Daniel Zaleski, assisted by Liz Keoghan, and now in its 11th year as the Queens Public Library is proud to present international artists from emerging talent to award-winning masters. These disciplines include music, theater, author talks, and film, now expanding into this illustrious virtual format. Culture Connection is currently reaching a global audience. Oh my God. The whole world is watching this? In a time of deep political divides, library staff across the country are facing an overwhelming number of book ban attempts. In 2023 alone, the American Library Association's Office for Intellectual Freedom tracked 1,247 efforts to censor books and other resources in libraries, an increase of 65% from the year before. In total, 4,240 unique book titles were targeted, many of them representing LGBTQIA+ and BIPOC voices and experiences. Hey, that includes me. This theme for Banned Book Week 2024 is freed between the lines, and I hope we're all spending this time utilizing the freedom to explore new ideas and different perspectives, despite such freedoms being under threat. Book bans don't just restrict access to stories, they undermine our rights. Now is the time to come together, celebrate the right to read, and find freedom in the pages of a book. Let's be freed between the lines of a nice book like the one written by our guest today, Kirsten Miller, author of Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books. A fantastic read, I must say. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Thank you for being a part of this conversation, Kirsten.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's I love the intro was very it got me. So
well, it doesn't end there, because I don't know, it was such a serious topic. Why don't we try and let me just tell you who I am. First of all, my name is Tim Barnes. I'm a comedian. I'm a TV writer. And I know that you've written many books. You've been in the YA space. You've written children's books. You've written, this is your second adult novel, right? Is that the right term for it? So the change, and now Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books. But I'm also maybe not as well known as yourself, but I'm a self-published writer. I often sneak my books onto shelves. So you may have seen one of my books, like I just took a DNA test. Turns out I'm 100% Cleveland from Family Guy. Or so all them black Harry Potter wizards just sat there and let slavery happen, the book. Or my book, How to Lose a Pound in 7 Years, or Da Vinci Code Switching. That's a big one for me. And this is actually a book that I really did write in elementary school called Two Scientifically Smart Ants. That's right. I was such a gifted child that it could have been just about two smart ants, but I wanted to be specific. These are two scientifically smart ants, written in at 74th Street Magnet School out in California, and truly one of my greatest works. And of course, we are here to talk about the state of book bannings and express our gratitude for the First Amendment, which says that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Or it's kind of getting blocked for me, but it's a lot of ors, and it's a very important amendment. And so now I want to focus a bit on Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books. I'm sorry, is this a long intro? Do you want to interject with something?
No, I'm mesmerized.
I really do love this novel, and to get people up to speed who may not have read it, I'll just read I have it here, proof that I read it. The synopsis here in the cover flap. Lula Dean is on a mission. The resident busybody of Troy, Georgia, is hell-bent on removing pornography and propaganda from the town's libraries. Even her lifelong nemesis, school board president and former cheerleading captain Beverly Underwood, can't seem to stop her. To prove she has nothing against good, wholesome literature, Lula builds her own little lending library in her front yard for her neighbors to enjoy, filled with classics like The Southern Belle's Guide to Etiquette, 101 Cakes to Bake for Your Family, and The Art of the Deal. Lula's library is an instant success, or so she thinks. What Lula doesn't know is that a local troublemaker has secretly restocked the library with banned books cleverly disguised in the jackets of Lula's wholesome reads. Literary classics, gay romance, Black history, Judy Blume novels, books of witchy spells, all just waiting to be discovered. As the townfolk borrow books from Lula's banned book library, they find their lives transformed in hilarious, profound, and unforeseen ways. But when the truth about the library comes out, the showdown that's been brewing between Beverly and Lula will roil the whole town and change it forever. Now that is what I call a great Star Wars opening call. I want to know, do writers write these inside flap? Do the authors write these, or is this
I think that was a combined effort between me and my editor. My editor is extremely good at writing jacket copy. So I think there's a little bit of me and a little bit of her in there, but yeah.
That's great. It sets everything up wonderfully, and I happen to love these little libraries. In fact, I always feel like it's a magical experience, and that's my favorite part of the novel, is that the lending library becomes this almost magical, almost tree of knowledge symbol for the town. And I'll never forget, I discovered one of my favorite books, which is Interior Chinatown, in one of those little lending libraries in my neighborhood in Brooklyn. And so it got me thinking, okay, what if an idea for stopping these this expansion of book bannings, I feel like a lot of them tend to be just people who judge the book by the cover and assume there are things that shouldn't be seen. So what if we simply, and this is probably coming from someone who takes the title of their books very seriously, a very challenging thing to hear, but what if we just change the titles? We keep everything in the book the same, but we change the titles so that they go past these new emerging censors. So here's a banned book called Boy Toy. And I thought, okay, if we want this to get past censors, we can just change the name very slightly to Man Action Figure. You know? No one's gonna do a double take on that. Here's one. It's called Anatomy of a Single Girl, and it has different things written on there, like knows when to let go, shaken but not shattered. But that's a banned book. We can change it very slightly to Anatomy of a Single Heathen. And no one, this will be a warning sign, they would assume, but the book still stays the same on the inside. And all the labels now say unmarried, unmarried, unmarried. Here's one, trans bodies, trans cells. Not hard to imagine why some people want to ban this, but just a subtle change can make them not think too much about it. We just call it, we go from trans bodies, trans cells to, let's say, The Matrix. This is one of the most banned books. It's called This Book is Gay. How about this book is what you're pretty sure your church's choir director is? Just a thinker.
You're really going there.
And now, here's something I can interact with you a bit, just to talk about how important books are. A lot of famous people read, right? They have favorite books. I just wanted to take a guess at, I told you what one of my favorite books are. It's Interior Chinatown. Can you guess what the favorite book of the woman who broke the internet with her breakdancing skills, the Australian woman at the Paris Olympics? Can you guess what her favorite book might be?
Do you actually know, or am I just supposed to guess?
I have exclusive information on their on their favorite books, and these are all
by all means,
actual books.
Please share it.
Okay, well, her favorite book is In Full Color.
Oh my
the book written by Rachel Dolezal. How about what's Joe Biden's favorite book? Do you have any ideas on that?
I don't even want to hazard a guess.
Okay, well, that's it makes sense once you really think about it. It's Cujo, because he famously has all these dogs that keep biting the Secret Service.
Oh God, that's
true. It makes sense.
I think that's the real controversy. Nobody's
right?
talking about it.
Right. Of all the things to bring up about dogs, I don't know why Donald Trump never really referenced this.
Yeah.
What about Donald Trump's favorite book?
I think come on, it's his own, right?
It's his. I know you mentioned The Art of the Deal quite a few times in Lula Dean's little library of banned books. His is actually a bit of a technicality here. It is a McDonald's cheeseburger wrapper, which is technically a book depending on how you fold it. Let's see, what else do we have here? J.D. Vance. Can you imagine what his favorite book is?
We have to talk about how much I don't like him.
Yes.
Not for politics, but for his book.
Yeah, well, his is actually, these are all actual books. I just want to reiterate this. And this one's kind of hard to find. And I don't know if he's going to get away from some of these theories about him, but his favorite book is It Was an Ugly Couch Anyway.
Is that a real, that's a real book?
How about good old Tim Walz? What do you think his favorite book might be?
I don't know. Something good and wholesome and dad-like.
Yeah, he seems like
something that you'd read on the toilet. Right?
He seems like he seems like a very literal man, right? Which makes sense when you realize his favorite book is I Played the White Guy, which we all knew Kamala Harris would need when she became the presidential nominee. And how about Kamala Harris?
Lula Dean's little library of banned books.
Wait, I hope so. Is she like Barack Obama? Does she release her favorite books every year?
I don't know.
Okay.
She should.
She should. Hers is Dangerous Laughter, an actual book. Everyone loves her laugh, but I think in order to win, she has to highlight a dangerous element of it. Let's get to some more celebrities. This is going to end soon, I promise. This is Ben Affleck. What do you think his favorite book could be?
Oh, I don't know.
How about the Donut King? He famously is always picking up his Dunkin' Donuts.
I think you were going to go with the J-Lo. Oh, now we have the J-Lo. Okay.
Any guesses?
Nope.
Okay, her favorite book is The Ex-Boyfriend Yard Sale. And finally, what is their favorite book as a couple, do you think?
I don't know.
I really love this book. It's Mo Ryan's book, Burn It Down, which they recently have done with their relationship. Oh, finally. Oh, here it is. J.K., author of the Harry Potter books. What do you think? Her. Yeah, her.
She's given you so much to work with. I
don't
want to step on your joke. So
okay, well, obviously it's The Matrix. So let us get into this discussion about Lula Dean's little library of banned books. Like I said earlier, I really love this book, and it hit home to me because I've been, I'll be honest, I finished reading it today. I love a deadline. And so, but I recently took a trip to LA where I was working on a project, and I also went to my granny's funeral, my mom's mom. And so a lot of the things that end up surprisingly pop up in this novel start to connect with certain things in my life. Specifically, its focus on the South. And you start this book with a dedication that says, "For all the good people down South." And so at the start of my granny's funeral, my mom comes out and she reads my granny's favorite passage from her actual Bible that's filled with notes. Mm-hmm. So then, and on top of that, I started to think a lot about my own connection to the South. I realized that my granny was the first of her family to move out to Los Angeles from Mississippi. Mm-hmm. So what I love about this novel is that it's not just about the premise of banned books. The concept of banned books becomes like a symbol of something much deeper. And we are all we are all books hiding under different covers. And I guess just to say that a lot of the themes that popped out hit me on a personal level that I was very touched by. I just want to say that. But we both share this beginning with working in the young adult and children's media space. And so that strikes me as like a lane in which you must become keenly aware of parental concerns. But when it comes to the topic of banned books, have you noticed an escalation in the young adult space when it comes to like the way you're pitching narratives and that whole process?
Well, I haven't written YA or middle grade. I started out in middle grade, which is the best, right? That's basically, you know, the kind of 8 to 12-year-olds, and they're wonderful. It's my favorite group. But, you know, I haven't written it in a while, so I've been kind of out of the YA space since the book banning really went full throttle in the past couple of years. But yeah, I mean, it's something that I've been keenly aware of. You know, that's a lot of the books that are mentioned in Luladean are from the YA space. And, you know, it's I think a lot of the books that end up being banned are books that people haven't even bothered to read. You know, and they're judging them like, say, Lord of the Flies on the cover of the book or the title of the book, or, you know, they're, you know, reading something on the internet and deciding that a book needs to be pulled off the shelves, and they're really not getting to know the books and understand them. So yeah, I mean, that was one of the reasons that I wanted to make sure that there were a lot of YA books discussed in Luladean, because I do think that there's, you know, a lot of book banning, particularly in that space, that is completely nonsensical. Not that any of it ever makes sense, but some of it's just outlandishly ridiculous. Like Judy Blume books. It's like, come on.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like when I was younger, I remember, and I don't remember if it was to the level of saying we should ban this book, but I remember a lot of the sort of religious concern about, speaking of Harry Potter, about books like Harry Potter. How has the book banning conversation evolved during your time as a novelist?
Well, I didn't, you know, it's funny because it wasn't something that I thought a great deal about up until recently. I think it's really hit fever pitch of late. I know it's always been there lurking in the background, but it wasn't anything. And I grew up in the rural South, and, you know, even I don't even remember it being a big topic of conversation when I was a kid. There were obviously books that everybody knew were a little risque, and those were the ones that we immediately went and checked out from the library and read as soon as we could. But, you know, it's been in the past few years, I think, you know, especially with the pandemic and when people had a lot of time on their hands and we had sort of this polarization that was going on in the country, that's when it's really hit. I mean, I think it's always been there, but I think that's when it really went mainstream, really went public in a way that it hadn't before, at least not in my personal experience.
Was that sort of quarantine pandemic era of the banned book scenario? Was that a part of what was that specifically what inspired you to start writing this novel?
Well, I think so. The inspiration for this was interesting. So, I mean, those of us who, who write books are, all, these days are very, very keenly aware of all of this. And authors talk a lot, and we talk with not only other authors, but we talk with a lot of booksellers and with a lot of librarians as well. You end up spending a lot of time with librarians as an author, which is great because they're almost always good people.
Oh.
And so I know, that's one of the things that really got me interested in this is just really hearing about a lot of the troubles that librarians are facing these days. They're on the front lines of this culture war, and these are not people who signed up for, for the all-out warfare that's happening in a lot of places. These are people who got into the job because they really loved books, and they really loved, people who read books, and they wanted to help people find the information that they needed. And suddenly they are the ones having to kind of hold down the fort in a lot of cases. And so I found that extremely inspirational. And I'm one of those people who, if there's a battle, my mother was very much this way. Like, she loved a righteous fight. If she saw there was a fight that she could get in on the right side, she was there with and I unfortunately or fortunately take after her. So it was a fight that I wanted to jump into because I think that it's important. And I think that there are a lot of people who are suffering needlessly, and I want to do what I can to support them.
I love that description of a righteous fight, and it feels like if you live in the South, it has to feel like a righteous fight. Some of these discussions,
yeah.
And what I love most about your book is your ability, and I wonder if this ability frightens you a little bit, to dive into the minds of people with opposing opinions in a very specific way that feels true to that character. People who want to ban certain books and who have this very specific vision for the way the world should be. How do you do that?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, none of the characters are really based on anyone specific. But I grew up in a town in the South, in the rural South. I know people like this. And one of the things that I know about them is that they are all very, very human. And that if you can find some place where your experience intersects with theirs, it's almost like entering a portal into their world. I try not to write about things that I have no personal experience with whatsoever. Like, there was at one point a discussion about, maybe the young gay Black man in the book finds a book that helps him come out. Like, I have never been a young gay Black man in the South. And that is not an experience that I have any knowledge of. And there are people who've written that book far better than I could ever write that. But the one thing that I do know about is having family members who come out, and the sort of the way that a family, particularly a religious family, can act in those circumstances. And so that was my intersection with that world, and sort of the portal that I chose to enter into, that kid's life. So, but it's, in terms of the people that I don't agree with personally, my intersection with them in a lot of cases is just humanity. There's only one purely evil person in the book. I don't think that there are a lot of truly evil people out there. I think there are a lot of opportunists. I think there are a lot of idiots. And I think there are a lot of, and that's what I've tried to show is just, that there are, no matter who the person is, they're human, and that we can, in most cases, we can reach them on that level.
Yeah.
And if we just try.
I like how the message of the book ultimately becomes that there is this hidden layer of connection between everyone, despite the things that they are adamant divides them. And I think that kind of ties back to what I was trying to say before. I didn't cry, I didn't tear up, but I got a little emotional at the top there, which is that during my experience at this funeral, I realized, oh, wow, I forgot that I'm maybe just like 2 or 3 generations removed from the South. And the South is this land of mystery. and that people talk about the words people use in the South. They're kind of magical and sing-songy, and they dance around it. And one of my favorite quotes, I think we can pull this up here, is on page 75 in chapter 9, The Clue in the Diary, where Darlene, I believe, says this. She says, people weren't mentally ill. They were touched. They didn't die. They went to a better place. They stepped politely around uncomfortable subjects and the people who inspired them. And then later on page 79, the worst thing you could do as a parent, she thought, was to shield young women from the ugliness of the world, then blame them when they did not see it coming. And that line in particular is talking about a sexual assault that Darlene experienced.
Yep.
And I was surprised. I feel like chapter 9 is where the true vision of this novel appeared to me. Because at first I thought this is going to be one of my favorite movies is Richard Linklater's Slacker, where it just kind of follows one person and follows another person, and there's these loose connections. But once I realized you were sprinkling this this much grander narrative, and that quote that I just read is kind of a tangible version of what the banned book scenario in this book symbolizes. Exactly. We are all kind of using these coded words. We're hiding the truth. To ban a book is to hide an element of history and to hide an element of yourself. I thought that this would end in a question, but none.
This is something that I love talking about, because yes, there are a lot of messages in the book, but one of them is we have to look at the ugly truth. We have to. And as a Southerner, that is something that, I have talked about a lot of things in the course of discussing this book with people. It's like, I've talked to people from everywhere. I had a book club Zoom the other day with people in Oxford, Mississippi, so it's and all over the South.
Yeah.
And, this is something that is extremely timely for people down there, because I think the South spent a lot of time trying to turn away from the ugly, terrible, horrifying aspects of its history. And in doing that, it never was able to heal. And, the first thing I talk about it at the very last chapter. I think there's a character who describes it as being born with a health condition, right? Like a really terrible health condition. It's not your fault, that you were born with a health condition, but you better look at it and you better deal with it, or it is going to kill you. And that is how I feel about the situation in the South. And we've spent so much time running from it. And one of the things that really, you talk about getting a little touched. So the other day, I got choked up the other day I think it was talking to people in Oxford, Mississippi. There's a Confederate statue at the center of the book, and the Confederate statue is of a general who is one of the main characters is a descendant. She's of that general. She's trying to get the statue torn down. And she finds out just how terrible he was. The local librarian gives her a book and she reads about him, and she realizes that this glorious man that she's always been told was this incredible hero was actually one of the worst villains you could possibly imagine. And she goes in and she's, this is her history. And a lot of people in the South have that relative. He might not be a general, but he's the one that we all look up to, right? And she goes in and she was like, I just found out the truth about him. I don't know what to do. And the librarian says to her, what was he, your fourth great-great-grandfather? And she said, yeah. She goes, you have 64 great-great-great-grandparents. Go and find one whose footsteps went in the right direction and follow them. And that's, I think, one of the things that has been a real revelation to a lot of people in the South is, oh my God, there are other people in our family tree who may have done something else, good, what I mean? And one of the things that, I've done in particular is go back and really pay attention to the women in the family tree, you know, and believe me, anybody's family tree, you're going to find stories of strength and courage and perseverance that will, those are the people that I want statues of. Those are the people whose footsteps I want to follow. And anyway, there was a woman in one of these groups and she was pregnant and she said, that's what I'm going to tell my kid when it's born. It's like, let's look at the family history. Let's find somebody whose footsteps went in the right direction and let's follow them and forget all of the other stuff. You know what I mean? Like, not forget it, but we're not going to put those people on statues anymore. We're going to find the other people who did something great.
And what I appreciate the most is because the South has this deep trauma and wound, and it's kind of the birth of this constant American amnesia that I've become fascinated with. Every 4 years, it's like, oh wow, we have a totally different vision of everyone from George Bush to it's like.
No, it's true. It's like, why not just look at it? Why don't we just let's open up the history books, let's open up the family trees, and let's take a really good hard look and let's deal with it, and let's keep moving forward. Let's try to make this country live up to the promise that it's never been able to fulfill. And
there's something you do near the end of this book, which is like, I was a little jealous because there's a joke that I haven't really been able to do or do something with, but I've always, as a Black person with 2 Black parents who clearly has some white people in the history that no one talks about or knows about, I've been obsessed with the 1 drop rule, the old rule that 1 drop of Black blood makes you Black. But I've always been like, well, what if you just reverse it? Then suddenly there's a whole lot of white people. If you reverse it so that one drop of white blood makes you white, there's a whole different version of American history.
Well, I encourage, and this could end up being controversial, but I encourage everybody in this country to do that. And I think that if everybody did that, we would have a completely different view of American history, and we would be able to have, maybe it would force an honest conversation about who really built this country and like who deserves to be in the Mayflower Society and who deserves to be in the Daughters of the American Revolution and all of that other stuff. Like, I would just love to see all of that come crashing to the ground and be rebuilt into something better. You know what I mean? It's like, let's pull down all of those old statues and put up something really, let's put up statues of Andre 3000 and Dolly Parton.
And the way that you highlight that in the story is like, probably honestly the best way to do that, because it's not too much you have to peel to realize that we're more related and connected than you think. Oh, that connects so well with the name of the series, Culture Connection. Look at that. Right. But I also wanted to point out this quote on page 125 in chapter 14 of Field Guide to Mushrooms of Georgia, where Mara, is that how you say her name? The Native American librarian.
Mm-hmm.
There's a quote from her grandmother where she says, "Gather as much knowledge as you can because information is power. In choosing how to do it is freedom. The more you know, the freer you'll be." And that stood out to me as like, perhaps, I don't know if you feel like this is your ultimate thesis statement for the book, but that really stood out to me, especially because I kept going back to this concept of the book of Genesis, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And I want to know, how do you feel about it? Ever since I was a kid, I was perplexed by this we have original sin, and then we have this original concept of like, God doesn't want you to know stuff. you have the danger of that kind of knowledge. Do you think about that often, or what's
I do. I actually had offered a kind of a different version of the Book of Genesis in my first novel, The Change, because it was more of like a feminist view of reading of it. But listen, what do you think? Why do you think they're doing this? Do you honestly, like, do you really think that these people who are banning books give a damn about books? No, they don't. They probably don't read books. I doubt any of them have books in their home these are people who are trying to control your brain. That's what they're after. And they want to restrict what people know because they want to control them.
Yeah.
That's all they want. They want all of us to see the world the way that they see it. And so by taking the books out about LGBTQ, people, taking out the books about Black history, taking out the books about the Holocaust. You start and sort of whitewashing history. You start controlling the way that people see the world, and you start controlling how they think. That's what they're after. Whether they would be able to articulate that or not is, debatable, but that is ultimately what they are after. And that is why we can't stop them. Like, every book that's banned is a freedom denied. Every single one of them, and so that's why, and I don't, one of the things that kind of, it pisses me off is when people pick and choose, right? Like, I'll fight for that book, but not for that book. No, we fight for all of them, even if we do not like them. Yeah. The whole point is that they are there so that we can learn, and that we can, that's the whole point. And so, there are a lot of banned books that I'm not, the hugest fan of.
Yeah.
I will fight to the, not to the death. I will fight really hard to keep them from being banned. How's that?
Yeah. Now I feel like I definitely have to read The Change, but what is this alternate version of that Tree of Knowledge story that you told there? And so, what's your opinion within that?
Well, I mean, you'll have to read it because it's kind of
okay.
It's a bit of a spoiler. So if I
okay, all right, I understand.
Give a lot of stuff away.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's the question is, was the snake really the enemy?
Mm-hmm.
Or was he doing Eve a favor? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So.
I love these alternate perspectives on those kinds of things. Those conversations are always so delicious, and the concept that having that kind of dialogue is dangerous is so funny to me. But I also know that this is a pretty grounded story, but there's an element of magic, it feels, within it.
And I don't live in, so people are always like, it's not totally realistic. I'm like, no, it's not. there's a little library where everybody finds the book that they need. No, it's not completely realistic. But yeah, I love that. In all of my books, or at least in all of the books that I've written that I like, I always keep one foot very grounded in reality, and the other one's kind of inching into, I wouldn't say magic, but sort of like a different kind of reality where magical things can happen.
Yeah.
So I think this one, The Change really, it really sends a foot in the opposite direction. But, it's true of this one as well. There's a little bit of magical realism to it.
I feel like on that note of like having like an alternate word for things that typically happens in the South. I didn't realize this I never thought about this until a couple of years ago. And I was like, why were people so afraid of the Harry Potter books and all that? And then it hit me that if it was just the School of Wizardry, they probably wouldn't have an issue. It really is just the word witch, I think. If it was just a magical school and everyone was called a wizard, I highly doubt that it would have had people up in arms.
Well, there's a whole, so there's a whole, and I'm going to forget the actual term for it, which is, because, it's been a long day, but there, look, there's, starting with the witch trials in like the 16th century, right? Mm-hmm. There's been those arose out of this idea that anything that was not biblical was bad. Mm-hmm. Right. So it was this completely sort of binary thing. It was either biblical or it was bad. Either God, and that's why a lot of women. So one of the biggest problems with, things that got women into trouble back in those days was healing. Mm-hmm. Because it wasn't God healing the person. It was a person healing the person. And the only way that the person could have healed the person that God wanted, had made sick was if they were getting help from the devil. Mm-hmm. So it was just sort of this complete dichotomy, like either God did it or Satan did it.
Yeah.
And that's sort of where Harry Potter comes up. It's this whole different world, this whole different universe, this whole different sort of it kind of, almost religious system of sorts.
Mm.
Because it's not the Bible, it is bad.
Yeah.
It can be perfectly moral. It can be, in the service of all sorts of good things. But for a lot of people these days, just as much as in the 16th century, if it's not the Bible, it's bad.
At the same time, I never heard similar complaints about like Lord of the Rings. It's fascinating the things.
Frodo was good. I don't know. That's a really good question. I've never pondered that. Now somebody watching this can go and write their master's thesis on it. Yeah.
How did you go about figuring out what are the terms? It's like you're either an outliner or a pantser as a writer. Do you fly by the seat of your pants, or are you a heavy outliner?
No, I'm an outliner. When I wrote my first book, I tried to pants it, and because I thought, I'm a genius. I'm just going to write this. And it turned out I wasn't a genius. And I got in like a couple hundred pages in and realized I was completely lost. And ever since then, I've been a dedicated outliner. Yeah, if I could turn my computer around, I'd show you. I have a giant outline on my wall over here.
Oh, nice. For the next piece of work.
The next book, yeah.
That's incredible. So when it came to the story of Lula Dean's Little Library of Banned Books, what's like the expanding set of events that like helped you create the structure? Was it literally you walk past one of those little libraries and you're like,
No, so my editor was down in Austin, Texas, and Texas, as we all know, I think has been having some serious issues with book banning. And the people of Austin had responded to that by putting out these signs in their front yard that said, "Come and get it. We have all the banned books. If you want to borrow one, come to our house and we'll lend you one." And she was very inspired by that. And so she sent me a note and she said, "How would you feel about a book about a little free library filled with banned books?" And I was in the middle of another book. Probably somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of the way into this book. And I was so eager to say no. But I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about it, and I started thinking about what books I would put in my little library. And I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And so I sat down that weekend and I said, okay, let's see how this goes. Proof of concept. If I can write a chapter and it feels good, it feels right, then I'll think about it. And I sat down and I wrote 4 chapters in a single weekend, which is really, really fast for me. I'm not the world's fastest writer. And so I thought, wow, there's a lot of stuff that I need to say. And, it just so happened that so the whole book, the library is sort of, it's the device that kind of, brings all of these, a lot of, there are all these different people in town who have a different experience with the library, but they are all revolving around this one square in the town with a Confederate statue in the middle. And I knew that I wanted that to be at the center because my hometown has a Confederate statue in front of what was the courthouse and what is now the regional library. And my best friend, through childhood, growing up into adulthood, had spent years of her life fighting to have that statue pulled down. And she died in a car accident a couple of years ago. And I have been thinking about what can I do to help further that cause? Now that she's gone, what can I do to step in and help without having to move back to so I snapped up that opportunity and sort of put that story at the center of the book, around which all of these banned books revolve, because I think it's all very connected. So there were a lot of different sources of inspiration. It started with my editor, and then there was a lot of stuff that I needed to get off my chest. And then that one big mission that I wanted to help push forward. And it all just ended up coming together.
It feels a bit like that was an opportunity to kind of do what your mother did, which is choose a sort of righteous battle.
Yeah.
And knowing that about your mother and like that started this, Beverly is my favorite character in the book. Is your mother somehow an inspiration for that character, or is it just like
She's more like Wilma. She was more like Wilma, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
Wilma, if for people who haven't read it, Wilma's this older. I think she's 85 in the book, and her whole family thinks she's gone daffy, and so she does something quite remarkable to prove to them that she's not. But I wanted to. So one of the things that I really want to do, and it was something that I worked into the change, and something that was a big, something that I wanted to, in the Lula Dean as well, is I really want to inspire people to get up off their butts and do something. Right? Like, I know we're all scared. I know things are weird and frankly quite terrifying at times, but nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to get better unless we get over it and start taking some action. So I've really sort of tried to prod women specifically.
Well, now you're going to get that quote taken out of context.
I can prod women, okay? I would really love for women to stand up and start changing the world the way that I think a lot of us know that it needs to be changed.
Yeah.
And that's why Beverly was my vehicle for that. She's scared to death of Lula Dean at first because, she has a gay daughter. She knows Lula Dean is going to go right for her.
Yeah.
And she finds the courage to take up the fight. And, together, she and her daughter end up winning the battle. And that's not a spoiler. It's going to end happy.
Yeah.
It's
there's a bit of like a Glinda the Good Witch and the Wicked Witch of the West vibe going there.
I can't honestly. When I was first thinking about it, like Pee-wee and Francis.
Yeah,
that's what I wanted. But
well, we only have about 15 minutes left, and so we want to open it up for some questions from people who are watching. And we've had a few comments here. So if no one has a question here, the question I think we're reaching out to people about is tell us a few of the most influential books in your lives. But we got one comment earlier from Nancy L. Gessner, who wrote, "This is a great book. I loved it. Serious at times, humorous at times. All in all, a great read."
Thank you, Nancy.
We also got that continues. Little free libraries are wonderful. Take a book, read a book, leave a book, share books. We got another comment here that says, "Thank you both for this great book talk. Yep. Can you tell us what action you would take if someone should try to ban your book or speech? Thanks."
Oh, it's my book in particular. It's interesting. I hadn't thought about what I would specifically do. Enjoy all the money that came. No, I wouldn't. I would never fight just specifically for my own, but I would certainly fight for all BAM books at once. I don't know. I mean, I guess one of the things that I think is really important is just engaging people in conversation. And not necessarily assuming that everybody is wrong or evil or, completely corrupt. I think the first thing I would do is try to sit down with them and see what their perspective was. And if they had read it and in fact, somebody wrote to me a very nasty letter because she had misconstrued part of the book. And my first reaction was to get very, sort of, you feel that, you're clenching in your chest. And then I thought, okay, no, I'm not going to get emotional about this. I'm just going to sit down and have an actual conversation and discuss the issue. And it was all resolved. But if I'd done what was coming instinctually, which was to fight, I think that things could have would probably have ended quite badly. But because I took a deep breath and decided to have the conversation, things actually turned out quite well in the end. So, I mean, that's the first thing in any sort of situation like that. See if you can understand where the person is coming from. It could be a mistake. It could be a misunderstanding, and maybe, you can have a conversation where you, at the very worst, agree to disagree. But see if you can have that conversation before you do anything else. We're all too willing to fight these days, right?
Yes. Pick your battles is a very important thing to keep in mind. Looks like we have another comment that says, I'm currently listening to your book on audio. Can you tell us about the fantastic narrator?
Oh, yeah.
Your book. The narrator is indeed fantastic. And I didn't even think to have this question. Who is the narrator?
Her name is January Lavoie. And she was my narrator for The Change as well. And I came into the adult audiobook world not really. I didn't know who the stars were or anything. There are a lot of people who are really, really well-known audiobook narrators. And she's one of them. Like, people love her for obvious reasons because she's fantastic. And so they brought her on, and I was like, great, I trust you guys. I cannot tell you how many letters and, DMs and all sorts of things I got about her and how wonderful she was. And one of the things is The Change, like Lula Dean, has a lot of characters in it, and a lot of characters who come from a lot of different backgrounds. And she was able to transition so smoothly and so beautifully and make each of them sound incredibly authentic. And that's and also be funny at the same time. Like, those things are so, so hard to do. So when it came time to find a person to read Lula, everybody initially was like, oh, we should have a Southerner. I was like, no, man, we're going to go with January Lavoie. Why would we go with anyone else? Like, that's just crazy. If she's willing to do it, that's who I want. And honest to God, like, if she wants to do every book that I write from now on, she's more than welcome to it. She's also a really lovely person. I haven't met her face to face, but I've talked to her online.
Oh, nice. Oh, are you a part of those recording sessions, or it was just sort of like, okay.
The public, the publishing industry, everything is incredibly siloed. Authors very rarely have anything to do with the audiobook recording or the cover design or anything else.
Well, were you involved in it? Because this is a beautiful cover.
I was actually involved.
Okay.
I wanted to. So this was, often authors are not, and, they don't want you involved. But this was a tricky one because the cover needed to communicate a number of things. It needed to communicate, I wanted it to be, so this is a book about really, really, really serious topics. So I wanted to get it across that, this was not a piece of fluff, but at the same time, it is extremely funny in parts and was meant to be entertaining. And it was done purposely because I wanted people to be happy reading about those very serious issues and not feel like they were being preached at or bludgeoned to death with, a lot of big ideas. And so I wanted the cover to communicate, seriousness, but also humor and, sort of colorful entertainment quality of it. And that is, believe it or not, a really difficult thing to achieve. So we went back and forth through a lot of different things, but, and I also just love fire. That sounds silly, but I just love fire. I wanted to have a flame in there. So
yeah, it sets it up all perfectly. And I mentioned earlier, like, at first I thought this was going to be purely in that sort of vein of something like Slacker, one of my favorite movies. But then by the end, I was like, oh, this is building up to like a Do the Right Thing. Like, this is there's a fuse that has been lit, and the build-up,
there was, right? It's,
the build-up's incredible. And I was also wondering, like, did you actually look at the sizes that are available of different books so that they match the covers that they're being replaced with?
That's so interesting. Oh no, I did not.
Oh,
No,
okay.
I took a lot of artistic liberty with that one.
Okay.
Like, I think I could have fallen down a rabbit hole with that
Yeah. That might be
and
thinking a
never
little too
come
much.
out. But yeah, in fact, I'm not even sure all of the books that are talked about even had dust jackets like in the real world, but they do in my world, my weird magical world.
Yeah. Well, we only have about 5 minutes left, and so I guess I can direct this question that we asked everyone else. I can direct that at you, which
Mhm.
is, can you tell us a few of the most influential books on your life?
Yeah. So I read the Amityville Horror when I was 7 years old. And
Wow.
that's I didn't that is actually true. And it really messed me up, but not in a bad way. I mean,
Uh,
I'm a big believer. My parents were, you know, um, my parents had a library, a fairly big library in our house, and we also, my brother and sister and I spent a lot of time at the local library, like a
hmm.
lot of time. They were like our second, parents over there, which I'm sure they loved. But it's oh, sorry, oh yeah, they never ever ever stopped us from reading anything
Hmm.
ever. Like it wouldn't have mattered what we picked up. They would have been pretty much fine with it. They probably wouldn't have paid attention. We were Gen X. So but I none of it. And I did read the Amityville Horror at 7. My aunt left it at my house. And
Ah.
she was my favorite aunt, so I wanted to be just like her. So I read the Amityville Horror, and I still sleep with the lights on to this day. I really do. But none of it. I read all sorts of stuff, and none of it screwed me up. I mean, that's the whole thing about book banning, right? The whole idea or the theory behind it is that there are books that are dangerous,
Hmm.
that somehow a kid or an adult or whoever will stumble across a book that's just going to mess them up.
Yeah.
And believe me, I read a lot of weird stuff as a kid. It didn't happen to me, and I have never, ever, ever heard of that happening to anyone else. I have never in my life heard somebody say, "Oh my God, that book ruined my life. Oh my
Yeah.
God, that was the book. That was the
Yeah.
game." Like, oh my God. Like what?
Yeah.
Never. But you know what I have heard a lot about is I've heard people say that there were books that saved them
Mhm.
at important moments, that gave them comfort when they needed it, or information that they were, desperately searching for. I've heard people say that, a book opened their eyes to something
Mhm.
important or enlightened them. And so I've heard a million stories like that. And I've never, ever, ever heard the opposite. So, I mean, I could go through a whole long list of books that opened my eyes in one way or another, or,
Mhm.
told me a story about somebody that, that was like me or different. I'll tell you, one of the books that really opened my eyes was Annette Gordon Reed's The Hemingses of Monticello.
Oh, yes.
Talk about just a fundamentally, like, just completely erase everything that you thought of American history and start all over from scratch.
Yeah.
That was the book that did it for me. Like, and I could not be more thankful. And then there was another book called Outside Lies Magic, which I talk about a lot. It's this crazy little book by this man named John Stilgoe, who used to be a professor of landscape architecture at Harvard.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And he just wrote this little tiny book, and it's about all of the things that we pass in our daily lives that we don't pay attention to,
Hmm.
and the absolute magical realms that we're missing, as we walk down the street every day.
Yeah.
The fact that, like, the medians and highways often have these completely unique ecosystems that are unlike anywhere else. And like it just all of these different, like, the history of manhole covers in New York City. And
Yeah.
it's just the minute you start thinking that way, and the minute you start looking for all of these wonderful little things as you walk through the world, it's like your universe just expands,
Amazing.
and that really, really changed my life. So long story.
Well, let's make a long story short. Thank you so much for joining me in this discussion. I hope everyone viewing got something great out of it. Shout out to Eve Ethart, our producer for this event tonight, who did an excellent job.
Thanks, Eve.
And you can learn more about me at timbarnescomedy.com. I've got a podcast called You Are the Genre, where I talk to authors and comedians and TV writers. And you can find out more about Kirsten Miller at kirstenmillerbooks.com. Across every single genre, but each one of them has a touch of magic. I think that's everything that I need to say. If there's anything else, you can just dub it over me in post. Thank you for have a great night, everybody. Bye.